Salute family. Thank Commander Zulu back at you once again in that Real Man Movement. Today, here at the Real Man Movement, we're going to be dealing with uncomfortable learning. And how does a real man and a real woman deal with uncomfortable learning? Let's talk about it here today with Tank Commander Zulu and the Real Man Movement. Fire in the hole, baby. Salute family. Tank Commander Zulu back at you once again and that Real Man Movement. Before we go into the topic of discussion today, which is uncomfortable learning, I would like to invite everyone to become a subscriber to the channel. If you are not a subscriber, I encourage you to subscribe today. And when you hit the subscribe button, also hit the little bell icon. By doing that, you'll be notified of everything that goes on here with Tank Commander Zulu and the Real Man Movement. I would also like to turn your attention to Dante's Boxing Nation, baby. Baddest brand in the land. If you like boxing, combat sports, journalism that is full of facts, not fiction, you need to go on over to Dante's Boxing Nation. I'll have the information in the description below. Now back to the topic of discussion. Uncomfortable learning. What does that mean? And what does it mean in the life of a real man and a real woman? Well, let's talk about the history of uncomfortable learning for a moment. This particular concept was developed on a college campus, Williams College in Williamson, Massachusetts. There was a group of students who got together and they formed an electoral group. And what they would do with the group is bring in people who had opposing thought processes, who thought differently, who had opposing opinions than what they particularly represented. So they would bring these people on campus and they would have a lecture with them. Not necessarily a debate, but a lecture. So they're dealing with a person who has an opposing view. It may be a strong view. At times it was people who were outright racist. And their aim and their mission was to have a conversation or have a dialogue with that person without including personal feelings or becoming angry or passing judgment on the person, but trying to learn from the conversation the position of the person, which is in objection to your own position. Very strong concept. And they named the group Uncomfortable Learning. And the president of the group at the time that I became aware of it, his name is Zachary Woods. He's also an author. This young brother is very, very gifted, very talented. I advise you to look him up. Once again, his name is Zachary Woods. He was the president of Uncomfortable Learning, and he's also an author. I believe he has a book out now called Uncensored. And I advise you guys to go check that out. Check this young brother out. He's really dynamic. But when I came across the concept, and I came across Zachary Woods and listened to what he was presenting, he was giving a presentation to a group of students. And he brought up the concept of uncomfortable thinking. Immediately I think from a real perspective. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to have a degree or anything to understand some of these concepts or all of these concepts. This concept in particularly is one that is pretty near and dear to me, because most of the things that I've learned were from being in uncomfortable positions. and challenging or dealing with or trying to understand an opposing view. That's what it's all about. Once again, we're dealing with uncomfortable learning. So your thinking process has to be a little bit different. In order to learn from someone who has an opposing view, you have to be able to listen to what they're saying, understand where they are, and evaluate without judgment. And in the process of that uncomfortable atmosphere you'll place yourself in, you'll learn something, whether you realize it at the time or maybe you realize it later on. You see, life itself is filled with uncomfortable learning. Many people are in relationships right now or have been in a relationship with someone and it was very uncomfortable because of your opposing views. You didn't really realize that your views were so opposing until you got into the relationship. The relationship began to develop. And then you start to learn some things about the individual that is totally opposite from your personal belief system. And it makes the relationship uncomfortable. You try to stay in a relationship as long as you can, and you're in an uncomfortable place. And whether you exist in the relationship or the relationship is disintegrated, you learn something from it. You learn something about yourself, and you learn something about the individual who you were in the relationship with. You see, that's just one example. Uncomfortable learning. It pretty much exists in everything that we do. You can have a job, and you think that it's a good job. You think that you can go far in that job. And along the way, somebody comes aboard, or somebody was already aboard or on the job with you that you have to encounter in a different angle now. And you understand that you have an opposing view from that person. The person could be racist. The person could be sexist. The person can hold values that are so opposite to your values that you can barely have a conversation with. That every time you see them, it almost sickens you to the stomach. Every time you're in the presence of that individual with the opposing view, you automatically feel confrontational. And understanding the real concept of uncomfortable learning, it teaches us that we have to be careful about our emotions being a knee-jerk reaction. In other words, when someone that we're dealing with, and we have to deal with at whatever level, work, relationship, whatever the situation may be, you find yourself dealing with someone who has an opposing view, a view that is very different than yours. We are wrong to take the self-righteous road and believe that our view alone is the right view. Whether it may be right or wrong. If it's a situation that's black or white, then it's either black or white. But in some situations, in some areas, there's a gray area there. Some people will finally come to the understanding that, well, we just have to agree to disagree. And that's fine. But no one learns from that particular angle. In my opinion, being a black man, I've worked in corporate America. I was in the military, and I've seen racism from both sides. In both areas, I've seen it. And I had to deal with it. In many cases, when I was younger, I had to go along with things. As I became older, I took a stance. And one thing about uncomfortable thinking and learning is that you do have to take a stance. You don't just cave in to the belief or the position of the opposed thinker. You stand on your principles, your way of understanding, but you also allow the opposition to present their case. Allow them to present their case and not get so wound up about it. You see, as human beings, we tend to get wound up about being right. You see, a lot of us want to win arguments instead of look at the truth. We have to look at both sides in order to understand uncomfortable learning, because uncomfortable learning produces the best qualities of a man and a woman if we pay attention to them. We don't have to agree, but we definitely have to understand where the opposing thought process is coming from. And how will the opposing thought process hinder me? Will I allow it to disintegrate me to where when I see the person I can't think of nothing but rage and anger? Or I can't think of nothing but judgment? That's not what this is all about. What the uncomfortable learner is about is dealing with those situations. Although you may feel that from the opposition, you may feel angry, you may feel like you want to challenge it instantly. Before they can get the words out of their mouth, you own them. And there's some people that are like that. I call them self-righteous people. But if you're thinking like a real man and a real woman, when the opinion comes, should I be surprised when I meet a person that's a racist? No, I shouldn't be surprised. Should I be surprised if I let someone into my life as a friend and they betrayed me? No, I shouldn't be surprised. Why? Because it happens all the time. It's part of the life process. But we're put in this uncomfortable position to learn from it. You know, it brings me back to the book in the Bible, the book of Job. You see, the Bible has all of our answers. And here's another reason why it does, or another example. In the book of Job, the Bible talks about a man named Job. Job was considered a righteous man. He was looked at highly in the eyes of God. The devil was looking around and see who he can torment and torture. And he sat in the presence of God and said, and God said, where you been? He said, I've been up and down the earth looking for who I can devour. God automatically says, have you considered my servant Job? Job was a God-fearing man, one that God loved. Job loved God and he hated evil. And God had his hedge around him, his hedge of protection. Job was rich with family, with wealth. He had everything a man could desire because of his relationship with God. The devil told God, well, you got that hedge around Job, but if you take that hedge from around him, I'll make him curse you. So to make the long story short, God says, well, go ahead. Do anything you want to do. Just don't touch his, don't take his life. So God removes the hedge of protection from around Job. And the devil begins to put him in an uncomfortable place. He takes his children. He takes his livelihood. He takes his wealth. He takes everything from him. And now Job, who once had all these things and he loved the relationship he had with God and knew it was coming from God, he lost it all. He's put in an uncomfortable place from being in a comfortable place. And as the story goes on, Job doesn't curse God, but he is in an uncomfortable place and he doesn't know why. The devil goes back to God and says, listen, if you let me touch his body, I know I can make him curse you. So God says, well, go ahead and touch his body, but just don't take his life. So the devil goes back to tormenting Job. And he brings boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. He brings sickness and disease on Job. And Job's wife even turned her back on him. She said, you need to just curse God and die. But now listen to this. Through all the torment, through all of the uncomfortable things that were presented to Job, he never cursed God, but he did despised his own birth. He wished he was never born. When he gets to the breaking point, when he gets to that breaking point where he can't take any more, God steps in. And the way the story goes, and I'm going to go ahead and make it short for the time of the video, but the way the story goes, when God steps in, he reassures Job. He brings Job back to his position of confidence. And Job now understands why he had to go through what he went through. He says, I used to hear you, now I see you. So he had to go through an uncomfortable position to learn something of value concerning God, of greater value than he already had. Because he had everything. He thought he did. But God allowed him to go through certain things, to trust him through it, an uncomfortable position, to learn from it. He learned God at a greater place than he had before he had to go through the uncomfortable things in his life. Now that's in the book of Job, y'all. And I suggest that you go and read the book and see what it says, but it equates to our lives today. As men and women, we go through uncomfortable positions with people, situations, all kind of things, whatever it may be. But you can learn from it. You see, that's what that concept of uncomfortable learning is all about. Some of us has been broken in the past by relatives, by loved ones, by so-called friends, and we were put in uncomfortable places. Sometimes we didn't handle it adequately. We did the knee-jerk reaction. We responded with our feelings and our emotions. So when you do that, you can't really learn with everything from it. And we're all guilty of doing it. But when we take the position, like Job did in the Bible, no matter what he went through, he never cursed God. He doubted his own existence. It almost seemed like he was becoming suicidal until God stepped in. You see, it's just like with us. Sometimes when we go through these situations that we have to go through, God just wants us to stand. Sometimes we stand and get the understanding of the individual we're dealing with to make the right decision. To either depart, to change, but most importantly, to evaluate self so you can learn about the situation better. Be a kind of learner, an uncomfortable learner. Being in an uncomfortable place and learning from it. Dealing with opposition adequately. Dealing with the opposing thought process in a way where it does not bring the emotional part of you out to where you can't see anything but your own ways. You can't see anything but what you believe to be true. I have to give credit and a salute once again to Zachary Woods and those students on that campus at Williams College in Massachusetts for coming with the concept of uncomfortable learning, because it represents each and every real man and real woman today. Situations we go through with our family, they're uncomfortable. There's conditions. Some of us have to deal with parents who were mentally ill and grew up with that and had to learn how to love them from an uncomfortable position, whether it's mother or father. You see, these are real issues, and that's what we deal with here at the Real Man Movement. We deal with reality from every angle, the things that no one wants to talk about. It's not all roses and rainbows every day. Sometimes it's thunderstorms, hurricanes, and tornadoes. But we still have to live and stand as real men and real women. And with that, family, I'm going to stop the tank. But once again, I want to invite everyone to become a subscriber to the channel. Also, give the videos a thumbs up. We need thumbs up on the videos. And also share them with friends so more people can learn about this real man movement. And get on the tank with Tank Commander Zulu. So with that, family, remember, fear no man but God, baby. No man but God. Tank Commander Zulu signing out.